Wanji, can you hear me? Oh, okay, cool. I can't hear myself through the speaker, so I don't know. Okay. Everyone can hear me?
Yep.
Okay, cool. Everyone, cool. All right. So thank you so much, Wanji. You're so kind in your words and introduction. It makes me feel like I have a lot more under my belt than I think I do. But really, I appreciate doing this. I know I've been able to collaborate with CSI a few times in helping students navigate this licensure and certification process because it is so confusing and overwhelming. So I hope that we can demystify some of this and maybe offer, or at least have this be an opportunity where it clarifies some uncertainty, questions, and just confusion so that you feel confident in your next steps in your career. So following my nice little slide presentation, we do have a table of content or agenda, if you will. So I will just go over a few of the counseling programs, the application process. And for this session today, specifically, we're going to be focusing on the two clinical licensures within the state of New Jersey. So those being the licensed associate counselor, which leads to the LPC, and then the licensed clinical alcohol and drug counselor or the certified alcohol and drug counselor credential. And I'm going to just touch a little bit on continuing education because that is very important within our field as well. We don't stop learning after our graduate program, and that it is a part of our professional development and obligations. And then just covering some miscellaneous items and I guess like tips and tricks, if you will, as I'd like to call them. So just a quick overview of the Department of Counseling, as you all are aware and are in, right? We do have four master's programs or four programs within the Masters of Counseling, and we have four concentrations, those being addiction, clinical mental health, school, student affairs / higher education. Our department also offers for certification programs, advanced counseling certificate, the certified alcohol and drug counselor program, the postmaster school counseling certification program, and the student assistant coordinator program. Our department also has a PhD program that specializes and focuses on counselor education. So if you want more information about that, I would say go visit our website and also ask any of the department faculty, staff, and we're happy to provide more in-depth information in those programs. But I just do want to take a moment for school counselors because this presentation is really geared towards clinical licensure, and it doesn't really talk about school credentialing or even student affairs in higher education. Our student affairs and higher education folks are kind of in their own little channel, if you will, and they are very much focused on college or working within the higher education realm, and their degree does not lead to any kind of credential outside of that or training outside of higher education. For our school counselors, your completion of the program will allow you to become a credentialed school counselor through the Department of Education in New Jersey. So just in terms of like what you would do towards or in the last semester of your training and education here, you will file for graduation. And what that ultimately does is it triggers our registrar to audit your transcripts to then begin the process of endorsing you for a school counselor credential. I would say, please keep an eye out for an email from the registrar's office that outlines the process. And that kind of gives you all of the details and the next steps. And your application is completely online through the Department of Education. And that there's actually no physical certificate that gets mailed to you. That's just the DOE. But you will, after the degree conferment and our endorsement, you will be issued the school counseling credential. So I do want to take a note and just highlight that for school counselors or for the school counseling folks that are attending, that also may think about enrolling in our advanced counseling certificate program, shameless plug, to then potentially go on towards licensure. But I do want to, again, move back to the focus of the licensure process in New Jersey. So in New Jersey, any kind of license or credential that is state issued falls under the New Jersey Division of Consumer Affairs. They house all of the licensure boards and regulates them and provides the statutes and regulations. And there's a board and committee for each of these different specialties, if you will. So it ranges anywhere from accountants to veterinarians to physicians to plumbers, et cetera. So if someone is providing services to the public, they need to be registered with the Division of Consumer Affairs and their professional board. So when we think of counseling, all of our licenses are issued under our designated committee through the department or through the Division of Consumer Affairs, which is actually under the State Board of Marriage and Family Examiners. And we have two. So we have the Professional Counselor Examiner Committee, and then we also have the Alcohol and Drug Counselor Committee. And so they're subcommittees under that state licensing board or the State Board of Marriage and Family Therapy. And so just some general information about your application and application for LAC, LPC, LCADC. All applications are to be submitted electronically. So if you attempt to mail a PDF version, they will not receive it. They will not accept it. They will send it back to sender. And you would have spent a lot of money on postage. So please make sure you complete the applications electronically. Those are found through the New Jersey Division of Consumer Affairs. And so there's a place that it says apply for licensure, and I'll show you all of that as we go through, but make sure that you apply online. You will create a username and password. This username and password is yours throughout your entire career. So it's something that will never change. Once you do create a username and password and start an application, you have 90 days to complete your application. And that means submit all of the information that is needed to complete the application. So say you're graduating in May, right? If you started your application in October, that's over the 90 days that you needed to complete. And so they would actually close it because it wasn't completed in 90 days and you would have to restart. So it's always better to start closer to when you have all of your materials ready to be submitted before, and don't start it, a year in advance. Applications will remain pending until all submitted documents are received. And then as far as when you will hear back, because I know that's always the nail biter, the committees have said that it can take up to 3 weeks or more to have the application reviewed and hear back. I always say we want to be conservative with our time frame, and I always say like 8 weeks. I know that sounds like, whoa, 8 weeks, but if they return back in 6 weeks, then they were faster than the 8 weeks that you were anticipating. So I think it works that way. But there are various processes that do take time, so it can slow down. But please, it does take at minimum 3 weeks, and I would say more towards 4 to 6 weeks, realistically. All right. With all of the applications, there is a background check, regardless if you've had one before or not. You would have to complete a background check. It is New Jersey law that we undergo a criminal history and background check for all licensures. So the licensed associate counselor, this is what we would consider the provisional license and the first step in reaching our end license, which is the LPC, right? And again, this is issued through the Professional Counselor Examiners Committee. This is a screen grab of the old PDF. You can still access the old PDF. It's great to have as a scratch pad, but I do want to just highlight these two application categories. So before obtaining your LPC, you are going to apply for your licensed associate counselor credential. So, right, you are completing a minimum of 60 graduate semester hours in a master's degree in counseling from a regionally accredited program, right? And that you also are passing the National Counselor Examination, so the NCE. So that is the first step in order to apply for your LAC. I will also note underneath there is two paths towards LPC or N licensure, option A or option B. For the sake of our training, most, and I would say like 96%, I might be making up that data, but I'm gonna say that's accurate. 96% of people applying for their LPC are typically choosing option A, which is the 4,500 supervised hours. So option B is more for folks that are obtaining a master's degree. I'm sorry, a doctorate degree on top of their master's degree. It's 30 additional credits, so that's 10 extra classes. In order to be issued the LAC, you must pass the National Counselor Examination. For folks that are current master students, we do provide the ability and the opportunity to take the exam or register to take the exam prior to graduating from the master's program. I would highly recommend taking it. That way that it's already done and over with, especially because you are studying for comps. The material can be, applied to both exams. So you're kind of already in that study mode and that exam mode that it would just make sense. However, if you decide to wait to take the exam after you graduate, or for my advanced cert students, you will have to apply for approval via the committee. So you apply for that approval through the LAC application. So you're still going to go fill out the whole LAC application, and there's a box that's going to ask, have you taken the NCE yet? And you're going to say no, and that triggers them to say, okay, they need our approval to sit and take the exam, and then you'll have follow-up steps with them about how to go about registering to take the exam after. But I'm sorry. But for my current master's folks, it's very much encouraged, I guess, from my own standpoint, to take the opportunity that's presented to take the NCE before graduation. It at least saves you some time on the back end of when you're issued the LAC. Within the application, you're also going to submit a coursework check sheet. It's a weird name that they named it. So what this looks like, it's like, oh, what is all of these domains? What does all of this mean? So the Professional Counselor Examiner Committee requires that folks who are obtaining their LAC and LPC have completed 60 graduate semester hours in counseling, and they need to provide 45 credits or 15 classes that are distributed over 8 of these 9 areas. So when you think of, and these areas of studies, counseling theories, helping relationship, human growth, lifestyle, group, etc. What I will say is I think Montclair and the Department of Counseling did a really great job with course titles, because, right, assessment of individuals, appraisal of the individuals, right? So our course names can go in those course titles, course numbers. You will have some that only have one course entered, so research and evaluation, right? Our research methods class would go in that. There might not be another class that you would put in that area, but there's other courses that would be applied to other areas. So you would need, I think we have 8, so it would be another 8, 15, so 7 more classes. And so that could be, intro to substance use. It might be an example of one that you would place somewhere. What I will say is within the professional counselor website, there is the regulations. and they actually list what they're looking for within these areas. So they will specify, like in counseling and theories and practice, it covers such and such and such. And I can't remember from memory right now. However, I would say access and utilize those and cross compare them to your course description, course syllabi, right? Because the answers are right there. And so a lot of times you might have more in the social and cultural foundation or the theories and practice than maybe one only in the group dynamic, right? So it doesn't have to be that three are in every single one, but you should have one pretty much in all of them. I think our program really provides that ability. So 15 classes. If you think, hey, I'll add a 16th just for good luck, they will then kick it back to you and say, redo it. I've seen it happen. So please stay with 15, 45 credits specifically. So again, when we're thinking about licensure and obtaining our LPC, we're also thinking about, okay, I need supervision, right? That's a part of the licensure process. So who is a qualified supervisor? So this is a list of some of the qualifications. We really want to focus on folks that have like their LPC with an ACS that's credentialed by MBCC. Someone who might be an LPC who has completed a 3-credit graduate level course in supervision, maybe a PhD in counselor education, or even licensed clinical social workers who have completed a National Association of Social Work clinical supervision course. Those would be the appropriate folks to supervise for LPC licensure. So when can you start accruing hours? Well, you need to find your supervisor and you need to submit a plan of supervision. You cannot start counting your hours until that plan is provided. So say you graduate, you obtain employment, but you don't have a supervisor and you get one 2 months later, those first 2 months of work would not count because you were not under an approved supervisor. You did not submit a plan of supervision. So if I'm submitting a plan of supervision with someone, I'm filling out the day that we're starting. The board might take 2 weeks. I can start, they'll backdate it to the day that I completed the plan of supervision. So they do have some give, but it has to be the date that the plan has been submitted to the professional counselor committee for approval. So once that plan is approved, then you can begin accruing your hours. And you will need 4,500 hours. 4,500 hours equates to 3 years of full-time work. The board breaks it down as they only accept up to 30 hours of clinical work per week. And so that breaks down to 1,500 hours a year. At the end of all of this, you will have your supervisor submit documentation that you completed it. If you ever change your supervisor, there should be also documentation of that counseling experience too from the first supervisor, right? So sometimes supervisors do change. You want to make sure that you're submitting and logging your hours so that the board has it. And that the supervisor, it's all being followed and you're accruing those hours and not missing out on any of them, right? Because I know they're pretty valuable. So once that's all completed, so this is just kind of an overview of applying for your license. So you'll enter the licensure portal, indicate the application for LAC, submit your transcripts and verification, get your NCE score sent to them, pay all your necessary fees, do the background check, and then you'll be awarded your LAC. So that's just to get to the LAC. And so when we think of the next steps, we want to, again, we're working towards licensure or what we refer to as end license or clinical licensure as an LPC or a licensed professional counselor. So we want to make sure that we're completing those supervised clinical hours. Again, that approval for supervision is important. Those hours get logged. It's something where you will keep track of them on your own. an Excel file within maybe the electronic health record that your agency or company might be using, but making sure that there's some kind of documentation that you're keeping track of as well, because you can be audited at any point to show that you're doing these hours. So when you're applying for your LPC, you finish your 4,500 hours, you submit all of the documentation from your supervisor, you go back into the portal and you just indicate that you're applying for your LPC. Because you went through such an extensive application for your LAC, it's not as comprehensive or needing as much. So you don't have to fill out that fun domain worksheet anymore. You don't have to resubmit your transcripts or master's degree. It's just kind of updating some information in terms of demographic and just verification that you're completing the hours. You're submitting all of that appropriate documentation, paying more fees because they love fees, and then you will be awarded your LPC. So it does take a process, and but it can be slowed down so that it's a little more digestible, as opposed to kind of feeling like you're in the abyss of where do I go and what do I do. And so I'll cover towards the end a little bit more some tips and tricks and general questions that I know people might have. But just to move over to the licensed clinical alcohol and drug counselor, this is for the folks that are within our addiction track. So our folks that are getting their master's in addiction concentration are both LPC eligible or LAC into LPC eligible, and then also eligible for the LCADC or to become a licensed clinical alcohol and drug counselor. And so that's considered the provisional or the end licensure and substance use counselor. It's interesting because the committee or the alcohol and drug counselor committee is a bit backwards compared to the LPC, because you need to submit the plan of supervision before you even apply for licensure. So the first step for that ADC or the alcohol and drug counseling credential is to actually submit a plan of supervision. And that actually registers you through the ADC committee as a ADC or CADC intern. And so with that is you start collecting your hours before you even formally apply for your LCADC. They have like preliminary questions of like, have you had some training in addiction or substance use education? But most of it is about submitting the plan of supervision. And again, you will need to verify your supervisor and upload all of that you would still create like a portal or a username and application process, but it really just goes into these upload license documents and state that it's for the ADC intern. So you don't get like an LAC or a provisional license. So when we think of the LCADC credential, who is a qualified supervisor? So it's more specific. A qualified supervisor for an LCADC applicant needs to be an LCADC who is also a certified clinical supervisor or has a CCS credential, or they are an N-licensed or a clinically licensed clinician, LPC or LCSW, who also has their LCADC and holds a supervision credential such as the ACS or the NASW cert, and that person has at least 1 year post LCADC practice. I hope that makes sense and isn't confusing, because I know it can sound pretty confusing. So LCADC licensure approved, a qualified supervisor needs to have an LCADC and a CCS at minimum, or could be a clinically credentialed clinician that also has their LCADC and has an ACS. So using myself as an example, because I think it makes the most sense, is I have my LPC, I have my LCADC, I have an ACS. I can supervise an LCADC because of my ACS. So with the application, you're submitting the plan of supervision that gets approved and you accrue hours. So with the LCADC, it's an accrual of 3,000 hours. which equates to 2 years of full-time work. And that is providing substance use counseling services. And that you're accruing the hours, you're doing the 3,000, then at the end, similarly, you're submitting all of that completed documentation to the board or the committee at the end after you complete your 3,000 hours. With the LCADC, there is another coursework check sheet, and it has 9 areas. They don't specify the amount of credits that need to be listed. However, they do require that one course be listed per area. So again, similarly, I really think we thought about this very well in terms of creating our course titles. And so again, thinking about counseling theories and practice. Counseling theories goes under that, right? So just listing one class per area of study. And this is specific for the LCADC application. The other part of the LCADC application, so again, it requires 3,000 of supervised hours. This is a form that gets completed. Within those 3,000 hours, 300 of those hours need to be in what they considered practical training, and that's over 14 areas, or what they consider like core functions of a substance use counselor. And usually if you're in the field and doing the work, you're pretty much doing all of these within your week, so they get completed pretty quickly. It's just your supervisor verifying you have the experience. And then additionally, within the LCADC application, there is a requirement of attending 30 self-help meetings. 5 need to be in AA, 5 need to be in Al-Anon, 5 need to be in NA, and then an additional 15 in any others. You don't have to bring a piece of paper to have the person at the meeting verify. It is about the honor system and your supervisor signing off on it. The benefit too, I think, of our classwork in our substance use courses is you kind of have to attend meetings anyway, because it's part of some of your assignments. So you're already doing some of this, right? So you're exposing yourself and getting some of this done while you're completing your education. The other thing that is really specific about the LCADC is that they need to verify that you have the appropriate academic and professional training in substance use counseling. We are an approved education provider by the Addiction Professional Certification Board of New Jersey. So all of these words on the bottom that you're like, what? Require coursework, and these course domains, what? What are you talking about? We do all of that, right? So our addiction concentration fulfills all of this. And so what you would do is you can either handwrite them in the application, or at this point type them. But you can also request a letter from us to verify your coursework. So if you're graduating from a master's in addiction counseling, you would email the department and say, hey, I'm going for my LCADC. I need the letter of verification of my coursework. And then we would provide that to you and the ADC committee. For my CADC folks, similarly enough, you would contact us as well, and we would provide that same letter. You also have the ability to send your transcripts to the CERT board for review, and they'll send you back a notarized letter of the course completion, but you pay a fee for that. So that's something to take into account as well. But we provide all of that coursework. We're an approved education provider. You're meeting all of these requirements, and we can just write you a nice little letter. The thing with the LCADC, so the LIC, you take an exam before you can even get your provisional license, and then start your hours. Where with the LCADC, you do your hours and then you take an exam. So the the LCADC requires applicants to pass both a written and oral exam. And you typically sit for the written exam first, which is computerized, I think about 200 questions, something similar to like the NCE. and that you're given the results the same day. And then once you pass that, you would then submit a case that has to be approved and signed off by your supervisor. And then and then once approved, you would then present an oral case, um, uh, providing an overview of your case and addressing all of the 12 core functions of a substance use counselor in that case. It sounds really scary. It is. I don't want to lie, but I will tell you how to avoid it. So for the LCADC, you'll complete the application. Similarly, so you're actually going to submit your plan of supervision. Once you complete those 3,000 hours, you're going to complete your full application, submit all of the appropriate paperwork, then get approval to sit and pass the written and oral exam, pay all the necessary fees, and then you'll be awarded your LCADC. So before I go into my tips and tricks and how to avoid that oral exam, I do want to just take a moment and highlight the continuing education. It is not a state of mind, it's very much a part of our development as clinicians, and continuing to advance and enhance our careers as well as serve our clients, right? So it is a requirement for clinicians, LAC, LPC, LCADC, CADCs to complete continuing education credits. So we do renew every 2 years. It's typically on the even year. So I just renewed mine in 2024. I will need to renew again in 2026. I have 2 years to complete 40 continuing education hours, both for my LAC and LPC and LCADC. Both have specific requirements. So our LAC, LPC, we need to have 5 units in ethics, 3 in social and cultural, and 1 continuing education hour in opiate education. With the LCADC, again, it's 40. 20 of those 40 must be in person or synchronized, right? So it can be live via Zoom, but 20 of them must be synchronous or in person. Of the 40, 3 need to be in social and cultural counseling, and we also have a requirement of 3 hours in legal standards, and they're very specific and specific for the LCADC credential. So that's a little bit of the overview of continuing education, but like, where do I find them? So a lot of employers might offer some, training systems such as Relias or Mental Health Academy, something like that, that you can do some trainings, on some downtime, if that even exists. But within just the comfort of your own home. So that's an option. Some other areas or places you can find continuing education. I know within your ACA or NJCA organizations, you and membership, you might get like an hour a month, or you can obtain certain CE units within the year. NADAC is the National Addiction Professional Association. They provide the ability to obtain continuing education, marriage and family therapy, and the APA also. So those are making sure that you're looking for providers, and making sure, especially if you're dually licensed LPC, LCADC, that the workshop or information session or continuing education training that you're going to is meeting the requirements for both licensures. So sometimes the question is, if I'm issued my license in, say, this year, 2025, do I still need to complete continuing education? Yes. However, you don't have to complete all 40. It's reduced to 20. So they kind of give you, okay, you don't get the full 2 years, but you get the one. It's a requirement of 20. If you're issued your license during the same year as a renewal year, you wouldn't need to complete CEUs, right? Our renewal for like LPCs happen in November. So if you're issued your LAC in August, they're not going to be like, okay, you need to do all of these continuing education units before renewal. And then if you complete more than 40 continuing education units within the 2 years, you are able to carry over up to 10 to the next renewal period. So it's always nice to kind of be a little bit ahead so that you can take as you need and not feel like you're scrambling to fulfill all 40 quickly. And so just some miscellaneous information. And again, this is more of like my tips and tricks, if you will. Make sure you keep a copy of everything. I know that everything's electronic, which is great. So make sure if you can save it as a PDF, or even just like I still have my scratch pad of information that I've kept for my applications. Make sure you're keeping a log of your hours. So this is important even after you complete your internship hours here. Excel spreadsheet can be helpful. I know some of us and some of you guys might be using time to track in terms of your internship. That's also a great option to continue to keep track of your hours that way, right? It's all digitalized and in a nice little box. And so it's very much something that a lot of folks use. Just make sure you're keeping your profile, especially for your LAC and licensure, up to date. So if you have a name change or an address change, you're making sure you're notifying of that. Something that is important to note is your practicum and internship hours can actually be used towards the 4,500 hours. So within the practicum and internship, you're completing about 700 hours. What you're going to do after graduation and when you get closer towards applying for your LPC, you're going to contact the department and ask for a letter verifying those hours. So instead of having to do 4,500, you're left with like 37. So it's not, you're not doing 4,500, you get to reduce it by 6 months or so. And so that's a give. The caveat to that is back with that coursework sheet where you have to put the 15 credits. Do not put your practicum or internship class in those domains, because if you do, then you can't use the hours towards the 4,500. They kind of give you you can either use it in one place or another place. So I suggest and recommend using those hours towards the 4,500 and not towards the coursework. For my folks that are going for your dual licensure of LPC and LCADC, this is how you avoid those two exams. Obtain your LPC first. Do not be like me. Save yourself tears, money, headaches, gas money, toll money. And stress and obtain your LPC first. So you can complete your supervised hours concurrently for my folks that are dually licensed. So if you're at like a substance use agency, you might be working with clients that are co-occurring. You can have both a supervisor for your LPC as well as your LCADC. They're signing off. I would say submit your LPC application and hours first, then go after you obtain the LPC, then submit your LCADC application, and that allows you to not have to take that written or oral exam. And then lastly, make sure that you're just staying up to date with our laws, regulations, and statutes within New Jersey. It is our professional responsibility to be aware of that, right? So if anything does change, making sure you're aware of it. Both the Professional Counselor Examiner Committee and the Alcohol and Drug Counselor Committee do have meetings once a month that are open to the public. I highly encourage you all to attend one in your lifetime at least, or start getting involved in it, attending more frequently if you can. It is via Zoom. They publicize it. And so you can also keep track of the minutes there as well. So if you aren't able to attend a meeting, should there be any changes in statutes or regulations, it would be noted there as well. So I would highly recommend just taking a tour of the websites through Consumer Affairs so that you're versed in that information. And most importantly, don't be afraid to ask questions. They are there to answer them, right? I know it can be really overwhelming and scary, but that is, if you're unsure, ask them. They can provide an answer. And if they can't, they'll tell you how to find the answer. Or you can go to those monthly meetings and ask there, and then you will be given an answer from the committee members. So those are some of the tips and tricks that I recommend for folks in navigating the process. And so just a quick checklist: you're completing the application, submitting your transcript and resume. They do require like passport size photos to be submitted. You'll do a background check, some fingerprinting, make sure you pass the NCE, pay the fees, get your LAC. With the LPC, you're completing the application, you're submitting the proof of completed clinical work, updating your photos, paying your fees, you'll get your LPC. And then again, with the LCADC, completing the application, verifying the 270 educational hours, completing the documentation of supervision and the supervision evaluation form, similarly doing a background check and fingerprinting. Hopefully not having to take the oral and written exam because you got your LPC first, but if not, passing those, paying a fee, and then getting your LCADC. So just trying to break them down by process and steps, because again, it can be overwhelming. But that is my presentation. Thank you all for coming. I know, Wanchi, you might have some questions in the chat, so by all means, this is my reference. And here's my contact information. Should anyone have any questions or concerns, feel free to reach out to me. But Wanchi, I will answer any questions that you might have or that might have popped up.